Hello, Global Theater. My name is Jerry Fialka. Today's July 26, 2022. We want to thank Rob Grant and his amazing podcast. I'm probably wrong about everything. It's an honor and a pleasure indeed to be here with Zoe Beloff. Zoe, where are you calling in from?
I'm in Lower Manhattan.
How cool is that? Um, First question is, what is the best thing for a human being?
What is the best thing for a human being? I think is to be loved.
Beautiful. What's your favorite form of information, how it comes into you?
Well, I like a lot of different forms. Everything from being whispered in my ear to reading the newspaper. I'm a really old-fashioned newspaper reader. Um, I listen to the radio and I never watch the television.
Oh, let's leave it there. That was such a great windup. But whispered in my ear, do you know this film critic P. Adam Sidney?
I know of him.
Yeah. Anyways, that's what when I said, "What's your favorite form of information?" He said, "Pillow talk." I thought just the fact that you described it as whispered, I love that. I'm a big reader of newspapers and a radio person too. Just to go off on a tangent for a second on reading, did you read because your parents were reading, they told you to read, or on your own?
I've been reading ever since I can remember, like I can think. Um, I mean, my parents, you have to understand, my parents were academics. So, like, books was super important in our house.
Yeah.
And I was expected by the age of 12 to be reading the classics.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay, that's good. Let's go on. We'll get more into that. Why do you think humans collect or gather information?
so they're not blind like moles. And sometimes to survive, and sometimes viciously to use it against people.
Yeah. Well, that is good. You really survived it. You're a great wordsmith. I appreciate that. Not blind like moles. That was beautiful. Do you think this need or want to collect information is more innate or more invented?
I mean, I'm sure there's a really good evolutionary reason to collect information because you want to know what's out there, what you're up
Yeah.
against.
Yeah. Do thoughts create emotions?
Or do emotions create thoughts? I'm not a philosopher. Um, of course, I don't. You know, they exist. There can't be one without another.
Yeah.
That's how we're human.
Yeah. It's beautiful. So you get it. See, I'm after inventing new questions and new metaphors. So there's no right or wrong answers. It's like your hunch on these. So um that was good because you answered a question with a question. I always say that's the ultimate. You win. So Zoe, I don't know what I think until I fill in the blank.
Uh, I don't know what I think till I've woken up in the morning. I
No,
mean, that's the moment I really start thinking.
that's
I
good.
think, where am I? What's going on?
Yeah.
And that's when I oftentimes I have space to kind of think about what I'm working on.
Yeah.
Um,
I love early morning. That's beautiful. Can humans think without language?
that's a really interesting question. I There are people who don't have language, um, because they're deaf. Sometimes they've never learned any other way to communicate. And I heard that they have a hard time remembering things. Um, I mean, in a sense, think Lacan would say we think through language. We are born into language. I mean, that's kind of the Lacanian idea, that we
Yeah.
are formed through language at its most elemental.
Yeah. That's good. Chomsky says a language is not just words. It's a culture, a tradition, a unification of community, a whole history that creates what a community is. Zoe, what do you do when language doesn't work, when language breaks down?
That's an interesting question. I did, at one point in my life, I did go and see a therapist, and when I really got to the point where I couldn't talk, she'd say, she'd get me to draw something, and she'd say, like, she'd give me this fat crayon, and she'd say, like, draw this really quickly. And at first I was really uncomfortable because I felt like, actually I know how to draw, like I'm sophisticated, I'm
Yeah.
an artist.
Yeah.
But she was like, no, just do it. And I would be shocked. I would surprise myself. I mean, that's one of the reasons I'm absolutely sure there is an unconscious, because I didn't know. I would, something came out, and there it was. I couldn't
You mean
refuse
it
it.
was a little more spontaneous than when you go, I'm going to sit down and draw right now.
Exactly. It was totally spontaneous. Like,
Yeah.
how did you feel about your mother when you were a small child? And I had to work so fast that I couldn't like formulate an idea. I just
Yeah.
had to make an image. So
Yeah.
I think you can think with images,
Yep.
and I think you can surprise yourself. I mean, it's not normally how I draw. You normally draw very consciously. I'm not naive or pretend to be, but yeah, those certain moments, genuinely, I surprised myself.
It's beautiful. Surprise is a great word. Your basic observations of humans in general, I know it's both, it's a stupid question, but are we more thinking beings or more feeling beings?
We live in dark times, and I feel like too much today is a result of irrational feelings, and that is not a good thing.
Yeah.
The idea that you can convince someone with a reasoned argument is becoming impossible, and that's a very scary thing.
Yeah.
I'm really, really sort of, when I think about the news, what really freaks me out, and I think a lot about, is like this edifice of lies
Yeah.
that we increasingly, and it's not the first time, but we see like these towering edifices of lies.
Yeah. Spooky. These are two questions from Alan Turing in the 50s. Is thinking a function of the soul?
Well, if Alan Turing were to answer it, I'm sure he would say no. Um,
But how about
I
Zoe?
am not a religious person. So the word soul is not a word I use very comfortably, just because I'm not religious. But I do think we're really complicated. We're not algorithms. The mind will never be like a computer. I'm with Henri Bergson there. So that's what I would say.
Cool. Then you anticipated the next question. You must have ESP. Turing's second question was, can machines think?
Well, he definitely thought machines could think.
Yeah.
Um,
But how about
because
you?
he thought about thinking as in a very kind of, I don't know how to describe it because it's a long time since I've read this stuff, but it was like about kind of very simple choices. And they weren't like ethical questions or large questions, but like yes, no, the way a computer thinks, it comes to decisions, it makes calculations. He might call that thinking. Like that becomes, I mean, he and Wittgenstein used to go at it because Wittgenstein absolutely did not think a machine could think. He thought it was, the question itself was completely nonsensical, you know. And that was the whole, I did a project many years ago about it's a lot about Turing and Wittgenstein and their philosophical arguments. So I'm trying to recall this stuff, but yeah, I mean, they had really different but really interesting, different views.
Beautiful. Do you more pursue happiness or more pursue meaning?
More pursuit. I'm not like a happy person. Like that's not my nature. There are moments of happiness, but it's not. I was born an anxious person, and I see the world as a difficult place. So there is moments that are happy, and they just kind of erupt, and they are, and I appreciate it. I'm not depressive, but no, I don't pursue happiness. No, that doesn't make sense to me.
Does the brain more, just your hunch again, does the brain more detect consciousness or create consciousness? Like, is consciousness there bubbling away and we're detecting it? Or are we,
You should be talking to a philosopher.
Well, no,
this is the kind of thing I would talk about with my father. He was a philosopher.
Well, we're going to get into art. These are just, like the beginnings.
What is consciousness?
Yeah.
In a sense, does it only belong to humans? And he would say it couldn't. The brain is just a piece of biology.
Yeah.
Nobody really knows where consciousness comes from or where it goes.
That's good.
That's question for ages.
I agree. Okay, what's faster, speed of light or speed of thought?
I believe biologically it's the speed of light. The neurons in our brain actually don't operate at the speed of light.
Audre Lorde.
Some of us are slow thinkers,
That's fine. Slow.
My father used to take all night, and then he would come out with a joke in the morning about something we talked about at dinner. It took him time to think
mulling over it. There's no rush. That's why I put in the pre-suggestions. If you want to think about it, silence is okay, because when you're in dialogue with somebody like we are, people think, well, if I say something, then you have to say something. No,
right.
I
feel like it's a test.
Yeah, it's just more.
But if we have an audience,
we're just wondering.
To get a coffee.
We're just wandering aimlessly. This is fun. Okay, so Audre Lorde, the poet, said you can't dismantle the master's house using the master's tools. Yvonne Rainer responded and said, you can if you expose the tools. What new tool do you suggest?
What tools? To dismantle the master's house?
You can apply it that way, or you can just put it in general context too. Because since I opened some of my questions with cue quotes, it doesn't mean you have to apply the quote. You put the questions into the context you want.
Right. I don't worry about that too much. I think apparatus does have meaning. It's not why you use a particular apparatus definitely speaks. It's not neutral. There isn't like, that's why I hate the word like content provider.
Oh
Like
God, I
that is a
agree.
foul and disgusting word. As though it was just like you pour into something. That's as I say, the apparatus itself speaks, and how we interact with it also speaks. And I think you have to be conscious of that. And it's the way things circulate in the world speaks and picks up meaning and changes meaning. There is no fixed meaning in an artwork. Something that was done 100 years ago means something different today.
Totally. What do you worry about when you go to bed at night?
I think that's a private question.
That's totally fine. I've gotten that since I added that question because I got it from Errol Morris's documentary on one of those political guys. I've had that one time, and someone said, "I don't want to go there." That's fine. So Marshall McLuhan learned from Ezra Pound, the poet, that artists are the antenna of the race. They're broadcasting and detecting the hidden psychic effects of our inventions so that we can learn to cope with what we don't like about the inventions. So, Zoe, I asked you the question McLuhan probed his whole career. Why do we humans ignore the hidden psychic effects of our inventions, even though the artists are broadcasting them to us?
Um, I don't know if maybe some artists are, maybe some not so much. I mean, artist is a kind of a broad and flabby word.
Right.
Um, that kind of gets thrown around a lot. Uh, that can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. Um,
Yeah, I agree. Just to interrupt, sorry. When I say artist, I mean the garbage man can treat his job as an art form. The shoe shine guy can do that. So artist, I don't want to use that term in an elitist way. Like, well,
okay,
we're
good.
special. I'm
Right.
just saying people in their craft, in their skills, in their
Hmm.
work, in their play, they uncover some of the hidden psychic effects of our inventions, because usually what we do with our
Hmm.
inventions is just embrace them and we don't understand how they change our behavior. And
That
so,
is absolutely true. I mean,
right.
and that's something that's been of interest to me in my own work. It's like, how did like this big project I did in the 90s called Beyond was all about exploring like how the unconscious interacted with the birth of mechanical media,
Yeah.
and like how that changed people, how we inventions are not something apart from us. They are also embodiment of our desires, fantasies, and whatever, and feed back into them. So they're not, I think people often have an idea there are things out there that inevitably progress, and are better, and that kind of positivism, as I say, making them apart from us, um, I think is highly misleading.
No, I agree totally. I heard your art lecture on YouTube and it was excellent. And I said, you're saying some of the stuff we've studied in our McLuhan James Joyce studies for 30 years. This is the main thing McLuhan got from Finnegan's Wake, is that humans extend their humanness through their inventions. So knife and fork extend our teeth. The shutter in a camera extends our eyelid. And even non-tangible religion or philosophy might be an extension of consciousness. So what humanness, since you're a drawer, you use a pencil or a crayon or a paintbrush, what does the let's call it the drawing utensil extend for you? What humanness?
Um, I think, well, drawings are, to me, drawing specifically, not like a big painting or something, but just drawing, like pencil drawing. I've always thought drawing is an extension of thinking. It's
Yeah,
thinking in action,
yeah,
and it
that's it.
takes place over time. And so it's actually kind of close to film.
Yeah,
I do a lot of drawing and make images and I also make films. And I don't see them as really different. Like people go,
really. Yeah,
like, oh, you do this and then you do that. Like, well, you're in the media department, so you can't teach in the art department,
yeah,
and to me, they're all forms of sequential image making,
yes.
storytelling, whatever. But it starts with drawing, and drawing is that's one reason I actually kind of love animation, uh,
Yeah.
especially early animation, because it's kind of drawing and thinking in action. You can
Oh God.
see
Yeah.
it in a very visceral way.
Yeah. No, I loved your clip of Max Fletcher and Betty Boop.
Mm.
I mean, you covered like what we're going to talk about in the next 30, 40 minutes. And you touched on so many things. So I'm not so sure where to go. But I wanted to interject this one McLuhan quote that sort of touches on this. I'm not even asking you to answer it. He asked it as a question. He wasn't saying, here's a statement. He said, how about technologies as the collective unconscious and art as the collective unconsciousness? So it's really perplexed me for years because what's the difference between conscious and consciousness? So we don't even have to go there. I just want to throw it out, but I wanted to carry on and we're going to jump back into all these different things because they also asked McLuhan, what does film extend? And most people would say the eye or memory. And he said the foot because you're traveling. Now, there's no right or wrong answers, but it's interesting.
That's a nice one, actually.
And then my poetry guy,
I mean, that's perfect for the Lumieres.
Yeah, it is totally. And in this poetry guy a couple months ago, I says, what does the pencil or writing utensil extend for you when what humanness? And he said tears. So that was, it was interesting. But the next question is, do artists have moral obligation?
I think all of us do.
Yeah.
Absolutely, all of us have moral obligation.
Yeah.
For sure. And artists in particular, because they put things out into the world but go off without them, have maybe more. Anybody, whether they're a writer or whatever they do, that goes out into the world, for sure.
Yeah. Are you more afraid of new ideas or more afraid of old ideas?
What Brecht said, it's better to start with bad new ideas than good old ideas. Meaning, like, don't get nostalgic about the past. We have troubles now.
Wait, this is Bertolt Brecht said, start with, what's the first part?
It's better to start with bad new ideas I think he meant as a subject matter for your work than good old ones.
Then good old ones. He is good. I know you did that play, and I'm going to bring him up in a while. That was beautiful. Zoe, can you conjure up your earliest memory ever or one of them?
Yes. One of my earliest memories was my father was a really wonderful man. He was a philosopher, and he tried to explain the mysteries of life to small children way beyond their understanding. So I have this memory of myself when I was very little. I must have been like 3, maybe 2, 3. And he was sitting on my bed and he was using 2 picture books to explain to me what an eclipse was. I had no idea what he was talking about, but I can see him today
Beautiful.
doing that. He
It's
would do that a lot as a child. He was always asking you things, and I loved him, but it was hard because you were so little. Like, he was really trying to get you to abstract thinking, but little kids aren't always ready to point out a right angle, for example.
that's beautiful. And it's amazing how many people answer that question with a visual experience, that visual memory. So is memory more a curse or more a blessing?
I think it's a blessing.
Yeah.
I see my mother, she has Alzheimer's, she's losing her memory.
Yeah.
And that's very hard to, she's okay, but it's hard to watch that. She has an amazing memory.
Yeah.
And I see myself as a kind of keeper of memories, and that memories pass through me, and memory is very important in what I do. So yeah, I think memory is really important.
Yeah.
Makes us who we are.
It is. And I am also a media archaeologist. I love that you use that term. You sort of answered this, but tell me someone within your immediate family, just briefly, then outside your immediate family, who had an impact on you, was like a role model, and what specifically was that impact?
In my immediate, I had an interesting family. I think as a little child, no, none of my family are artists. I'm the only one. Even in my extended family, I'm the only one. Um, but the person who came perhaps closest in a certain way was my maternal grandmother. And she was a German Jewish refugee. And she was just a really, really sweet person. And I really bonded with her. And she was a dressmaker. I mean, that's what she did to make a living. But she loved it. Like, she could make anything. She could make dolls. She could make dolls' clothes. You'd see somebody walking down the street and you'd go, that's a beautiful coat. And she could make it. You know, she was an artist. She could
Yeah.
we made dolls' houses. We did things. She took me shopping, and we would like admire fabrics together. I mean, I think she treated me, she was like, she loved me. And she wasn't as judgmental as my mother. She's my grandmother. And we did things, and she made me things. And I got this idea that if you dreamed of something, you could just make it with things around the house.
That
And
is
to
so
me, that is like the basis of my art, you know, and I think it should be the
that,
basis of everybody's art. But
that's beautiful. I have to know, what did you call her? Like Nana? What's your name for
her
her?
name was Ruth, and we called her Ruth.
Wow, you didn't call her grandma or granny or anything?
No, in my
Wow.
house, we called everybody by their first name.
Oh, how
That
cool.
was just how my parents were, and that's how we grew up. Like, I called my
Yeah.
parents by their first name, my grandparents by their first name. Um, the other grandparents, though, we didn't call by their first name. My father's parents, who were much different, they were older, I think were older, and they were different kind of people. Like, you didn't go stay with them and do fun things. You were introduced to them. They were Russian Jews, and my my father's mother was known as Bobby, and I always thought her name was Bobby, but that's just the Russian or the Yiddish for grandmother, and I
Yeah.
didn't discover that till I was a grown up.
Yeah. And so now outside your immediate family, same question. Had an impact. What specifically was that impact?
Do you mean when I was a child, or
You can put it in any context you want. It's
okay?
basically early, but it doesn't have to be early.
I'll tell you another person, because I'm going to see them, and I haven't seen them in forever, who had a big impact on me when I was 16. I quit high school when I was 16 because I had had enough. I'd had it. And but I decided it wasn't I still wanted to go to college, and specifically I wanted to go to art school. And so I had a year before to get ready to go to college. So I went to um, I decided to educate myself, you know, and I did a couple of things. I went to community college and took some classes, mainly art, just because it was much funner than high school.
Yeah.
It was like community college, and then I took this night class. I think my mother told me it was a night class um, in cinema, and it wasn't even at a college. I think it was like part of a Workers' Education Alliance or something, and it was run by a really amazing woman called Linda Miles, who ran the Edinburgh Film Festival in the 1970s when it was like the super hip place to be, Edinburgh Film Festival. Um, and I would go to her class, and I would be with like grown-ups, and we would sit drinking absolutely abysmal instant coffee and talk about a movie. And she ran this like art cinema, and every week then we'd go and see whatever was at the art cinema. And on the one hand, I was watching like Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid. On the other hand, like we were reading Peter Wallen and Science and Meetings in the cinema. And it just blew my mind. And I was like, I'm there.
Beautiful. What a great.
In fact, I went and all through when I was at art school, my summer job was always working for the Edinburgh Film Festival. And that's where I got my first really great film education. But I would go see films all the time.
Yeah, you got a taste for different films, not just mainstream. That was beautiful. So you kind of applied this. Did your parents raise you a particular religion?
No, they were atheists.
Oh.
They were Jews and atheists. So I was raised without a religion. But I mean, we would go to the relatives, and we would have the Hanukkah or the Passover and, all that kind of stuff. And also, because I grew up in Scotland, I went to a school where we sung hymns every morning, because that's what you do in Scotland.
Yeah.
So I learned a lot about Christianity, and I said the Lord's Prayer a lot, and all that kind of stuff.
Perfect. You anticipated. Next question is, do you pray?
No, I do not believe there is a God.
Well, that's the next question. If God does exist, what would you like God to say to you after you die?
I don't know. If the God exists, he's a very cruel God. So I hope that doesn't happen.
That's dude, again, you'd be like all three of these, you anticipate next question. Do evil people exist, or does evil use people as a vehicle?
So, well, since I'm not religious, I would definitely say that evil people exist. Yes.
Yeah. How do you advise? Yeah. How do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? And I'll set up with a few modern thinkers. Alan Watts says, if you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them. Coppola stole from the mob and the samurais. Keep your friends close and your enemies closer. JFK says, forgive your enemy, but don't forget their name. And Fellini says, I need an enemy. It's a lot of thoughts. Zoe, the basic question is how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? But first, how would you react to Alan Watts? If you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them.
Well, there's different kinds of enemies. I mean, I'd say with Alan Watts, like if somebody is trolling you, just ignore them.
Yeah.
Like for everyday like asshole enemies, they want you to acknowledge them. That's kind of why they're doing it. Like, don't get in a fight on Facebook. That's stupid. That's exactly what they're looking for. Don't rise to it.
That's it.
Big enemies, one can't just. That's a different thing. And you know, um, I'm sorry, but like, you can't just ignore Vladimir Putin invading the Ukraine. You can't just ignore him.
Yeah. Well, Baba Ram Dass said, I'm having a real hard time loving George Bush. It's like fill in the blank. I'm having a real hard time loving Putin. Like, what can you do? It's quite a challenge. James Joyce was the first projectionist in Dublin over 100 years ago. He basically checked out. He said, this is stupid. Why should I go inside a building and see a movie of a tree when I can go outside and see a real tree? Years later, Faulkner said, sometimes the best fiction is more true than journalism. Why do we have to recreate things in order to get them? Why do we have to go to a theatrical play of people acting out life? Why don't we just live life?
What's your question? Like,
What?
am I?
Well, it's the last one. Why do we have to go to a theatrical play of people acting out life? Why don't we just live life? That's the question.
Well, actually, I don't. I personally, when it comes to theater, I'm not interested. Like, I hate really naturalistic theater. Like, naturalistic theater to me is kind of pointless and a little tacky. I when it comes to theater, when I like theater, it's usually very anti-naturalistic, and it's because people are thinking and showing, and rather than describing, you show. I think you can do really interesting things, like any kind of artwork. But if you are just trying to kind of create an illusion of life, like, yeah, what exactly is your point?
Yeah. Well, this leads to
That's why I hate like good actors, like, because they're just like, really, Meryl Streep? No, it's like,
I agree.
So like realistic.
Yeah.
I'm with Brecht there.
No, I agree with you. And I appreciate people who are fine at their craft, but Jacob Collier, this music guy, he does everything too perfect because there's no rough edges. There's no humanity shown through, but I'm not criticizing him. It's interesting because the question I'm asking you now, Zoe, is you've described this well, how you got attracted to creating and making with your grandmother, how that night class in film got you interested. I would like to know, when was the tipping point when you started going, well, I could do this making, whether it's art, drawing, or with film, as a career and pay for my rent and do it, and go into media archaeology as a career. What was the tipping point when you said, I can do this? I want to do this.
Well, first of all, kids out there, it's not a career and it doesn't pay the rent. So like, get over that.
Yeah,
it's a good way to lose money. I have a day job, and I've always had day jobs. So that's a whole different question. When I decide I want to be an artist, it's a different question to, I could make it a career. I'm always very dubious about this idea of like, I think a lot of young people have this idea that it can be a career or it's not. I mean,
yeah, but
that's really something worth talking about.
No, that's well put. That aside, you are booked in an art museum to give a lecture on art, and you've had your films shown in legitimate highbrow film festivals. So I'm saying, whether you get paid or not, you don't have to apply the word career. I mean, that you truly wanted to pursue these role model, or what do you call that? Yeah, you wanted to pursue those callings. One person said those callings, like the kickover where you wanted to pursue that calling.
That's a good question.
Yeah.
I do have I remember my mother saying to me when I was like, reminding me, I guess, because I don't remember it, when I was like 5 years old and I would draw and paint and stuff. And my mother said to my father, "Oh, she's so great. It'll be so sad when she like grows out of this."
That's
I've still
beautiful.
not grown out of it.
Thank God you never grew out of it. That's all artists are trying to be childlike.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My grandmother actually had two wonderful careers in mind for me, which were very charming, which I didn't pursue. But she would have been great. They were great, and she would have been even greater at it. She thought it'd be really good because I was so artistic that I would go into window dressing, like for fancy department stores. I would like do these windows. She would have, which I'm sure I could do actually really quite well. And she would have been like fabulous at it. So I think that as a very sweet career, that a path that I never took. She also thought I'd be really good doing little drawings for the New Yorker. They have like little drawings at the ends of things,
Yeah.
like they just need a little drawing. She thought I'd be good at the little drawings. But I think when I was 12 I definitely decided, like when kids were thinking like, what do I want to do when I grow up? I wanted to be an artist. And it had a lot to do, apart from the fact, I loved to draw, and I was good at it. That the art room was one place that people didn't really bother you. You would kind of do your own thing, and there was no right answer. Like that was the huge thing to me. Like I realized there was no right and wrong, and so I was the artist, and that made it very appealing to me.
It's really beautiful. McLuhan's line is perfect. The Balinese have no word for art. They do everything as well as they can. It's just this process of doing. So this question, Zoe, is a screenwriting teacher told me great art is when you can clearly see the intention of the maker. Kubrick says the opposite. Great art is when you can clearly not see the intention of the maker. What role does intention play when you're making a piece of art, drawing, or making a film?
I think I need to have an intention and a clarity about what I'm doing. Otherwise, it just becomes kind of vague and nebulous, and it can mean whatever you want it to mean. I'm not that kind of an artist. I have a project, and I have. Sometimes you find meanings. It's like you learn as you go.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm not everybody's gonna have this take away the same thing. But yeah,
Well, Duchamp says, yeah,
I'm
go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
yeah, I think you need to have a clarity about what you're doing.
Yeah.
You can't. People find that in different ways. Some people are really good at improvising. I'm not so good at improvising. But I think it's great when you have just like a core idea, like an idea that my great film teacher used to say, like, you should be able to describe your film in one sentence.
Yeah.
You have a core, and then it can expand kind of as it goes.
Yeah. And then Duchamp said there's no art without an audience. How much are you thinking of your art viewer or your film viewer when you're making your film or making your art? How much are you thinking of your audience?
Increasingly, as I've gotten older, I think about my audience. I do think about it a lot, and I think that's important. I think there are times in my life when especially when I was in my 30s, a time when I was very isolated. Um, and I was doing things, and I had no idea at first whether anybody would ever see it. But I needed to do it, and I needed to figure some things out. Um, and that was important for me. Uh, I mean, to me, I mean, I know in part I make art. There's a certain amount of escapism. I'd like build worlds and then I can live in them.
Yeah.
I'm sure if I was on a therapist's couch, that would become apparent. Um, if I was totally happy with the world in which I live, maybe I wouldn't need to make art. Um, but increasingly, I want to think about my audience, who my audience is, and it can be different people, but like to be generous. I think it's really important to be generous and not expect your audience to have lots of intellectual knowledge to be able to appreciate your work. Um, I mean, one of my favorite projects, perhaps one of my most successful projects I did, was called the Coney Island Amateur Psychoanalytic Society and its Circle. Um, and I did that in a in the Coney Island Museum, which sounds kind of fancy, but it actually was this room above a bar and freak show in a amusement park. Um, so it was both the audience. Was a very vernacular audience with people with kids, children, locals, tourists. This was not the Museum of Modern Art.
Yeah.
Um, and created a kind of historical project about an imaginary society, because in an amusement park, nothing is what it seems to be. So the might have been the society, and they were working people who explored their inner lives, and I took it totally seriously. And I'm actually really serious about psychoanalysis, but I knew that most of my audience would never have heard of it. So, how to make something that's funny and lively and generous, and even little kids will enjoy it because it's got exhibits that are kind of low to the ground, as well as other things. But also, it can be fun for intellectuals. Like, you want to figure these things out and be generous to everybody. So maybe you never heard of psychoanalysis, but now you will have, and you learn something about Coney Island and its history. And if you're kids, you just want to like touch these models. I would think there should be something for kids in a show. I mean, I'm doing a project right now. Um, I'm painting. You'll see a banner behind me that's in the middle of being painted. And it's a project to celebrate essential workers. And it started off, it was going to be a mural, and then my partner Eric was like, but under each, and it was going to be portraits of essential workers in this like a mural, and he's like, underneath each one should be a QR code, and it'll be a film portrait. People be accessed so they can talk about their world and their lives and their dreams, and so it's kind of grown, expanded. We actually did get some money for it, and a lot of this. So there is now portraits of 14 workers. We made 14 short films, one with each worker, of very different kinds of people. Some speak English, some do not. And then I'm now painting a series of banners, which can move around in different venues. And ideally, I want this to be in many ways for the workers themselves. This is not for the elite people in museums. I mean, ideally, I'd like these banners. They're going to be in a couple of nonprofit art spaces. Um, Ultimately, one in my neighborhood, which is really kind of community art space. I would love it to be in public libraries. I think that'd be a perfect space for these banners. So if there's any libraries out there, I can just roll them up. And they have QR codes on them so people can see the films on their phones. And in part, I'm painting these portraits for they're life-size portraits for these people. I feel like they're my clients. They have to really enjoy their own portraits. And the films, they've been sharing them with friends and family and um, various different things. So I'm thinking a lot about audience, yeah, and
Yeah.
about being generous and about sharing. But sometimes I make more intellectual projects.
But
I don't think it has to be always one thing.
right. It's wide open. And I love your generous spirited. And let's go to one political question that you sort of evoked. Utah Phillips said, anarchy is making rules for yourself, not others. Who's entitled to make the rules?
Who's entitled? I don't know. I mean, I think should one makes one's own rules, and if one is a good person, that should be enough. I mean,
Yeah,
we don't want the Supreme Court making rules for us.
exactly. I agree. Yeah. So onward and upward, Peter Greenway said cinema is much too rich a medium to be left to storytellers. Are experimental filmmakers telling stories a different way or doing something completely different?
I'd say, well, first off, most experimental filmmakers I've encountered would not consider me an experimental filmmaker. So I don't want to speak on their behalf.
Right, but I'm just saying in general, your knowledge of them, you're not making mainstream films per
I'm
se.
not making it. I mean, this comes to a big problem I have. I'm not making mainstream, films from Netflix.
Yeah.
But I'm also not making films that you can show at the Ann Arbor Film Festival. So I live
Well,
in some kind of indeterminate zone. That
that's
seems
even
written
more
to me.
that but that's even touches on more. If you're going to call something experimental film, then you can't define it. You go to Wikipedia and it says experimental film, non-narrative, one person project.
Right.
And
Well,
they
first of all, I'm making narrative films. I mean,
right.
I
Okay,
so I make
then
films with
let's stay
primarily
on
with
that. Then let's
script.
stay on that because this is interesting. Laurie Anderson on 60 Minutes last week said a very interesting thing. She goes, I don't want to be, I guess I'm a multimedia artist, but I don't like that term multimedia artist. I'm a storyteller. And if you know her art, she's basically a storyteller, but she uses many mediums like you. You use history, you use drawing, you use film. And so a great experimental filmmaker, Hollis Frampton, said narrative is born among the animal necessities of the spirit because we're waiting to die. So it's a cute quote and it's interesting, but what's the difference for you between narrative and storytelling? Because you brought that up earlier, storytelling, sequential images. So is there a difference between narrative and
No, I
storytelling?
think they're just kind of two words that mean the same thing.
Right. Can you forget to die?
One hopes one doesn't think about it too often.
I I spoke with Michael Apted about 40 years ago, and he's a narrative filmmaker, and he made 28 and Up, a documentary. And I said, why do rock video editors feel so obliged to edit fast? This is when MTV was first breaking. And most people don't know Abel Gance invented rap montage in 1922, but it really flourished in the 80s. And to the point where Marty Scorsese says, I cut my films faster because of MTV. So he said, because we can learn to take in information faster. So I asked this question with a bias. Can we literally learn to take in information faster, or are we just brainwashed to believe we can?
I don't know. I think people are increasingly distracted, um, thanks to social media. Uh, I don't know.
Do you think it's literally possible for humans to multitask?
Yes, I do.
That's fine. What do you think the motive, just your hunch, your guess, what do you think the motive of the cave artist was?
That's a really interesting question. Because I think the, the to conjure something up,
Yeah, what a great word.
to give it presence and life. And that's
Yeah,
kind of an amazing thing to be able to do with a drawing, is to kind of give something life.
yeah. To give it life. That is an amazing way to put it, because here's the next question. You know, the guy who started the Ann Arbor Film Festival 60 years ago, it's pretty amazing because it's half the amount of the, cinema's only 130 years old and he started 60 years ago. His mantra was ignore yourself. Jonas Mekas says there is no self-expression. And the great jazz pianist Cecil Taylor says, I'm just a vehicle and this stuff just comes through me. Again, it's a stupid question. I know it's both and it depends, but just your hunch. Is art making more self expression or more you're a vehicle for whatever culture, technology, or environments are dominant?
Um, I think for me personally, I always think of myself as an antenna or somebody like who is spoken through. I'm not
Yeah.
interested in expressing myself. I'm not that interested in myself. But I do think I am kind of like character people from the past. I can be in dialogue. I've done a lot of projects where I'm in dialogue with people from the past, or sometimes even people from the present. I feel like I I form a dialogue. Um, it's not about me, but I am able to be a vehicle for something, to be able to articulate something. Um, I have alter egos, but it's not about me. I'm surprised Jonas said that because he did those like diary films. It would be all about him.
Well, look at, I isolated that one quote from him. I know what you mean. But, this is just to make
I
the
mean,
point.
some artists think of themselves, it's about their self expression.
Yeah.
I do not. I am not at all.
But the question really hidden is, can art making be egoless?
No, because I think it's a dialogue. We can't just, however much we want, we are embodied something.
Yeah. Then the follow-up question is, was Freud right?
Freud was onto something. It's
Good way
different
to.
than being right.
That is good. I like that. What's more important, conviction or compromise?
It depends. We don't. If one's an artist, one kind of has to go with one's conviction, but one also has to be a really good listener. And I think that's really the one of the very hardest things about being an artist is, like, on the one hand, sometimes you just have to, even though everybody says no, that would be a disaster, you just have to go for it. Other times it you really should listen. I work a lot with my husband, who's my partner on my project. He's a cinematographer in my films, Eric Muzzy, and we go back and forth. Like, and he'll look at my work and he'll like look at what I'm editing, and he'll go, "No, that doesn't work. You should do try blah 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 and blah blah blah." And I'll be like, no, I like it the way it is. And he will like, no, it doesn't work. And then finally I'll be like, okay, I'll try your idea after like fighting. And then he's right. We do that with each other like all the time, but it makes the work stronger.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's like the cliche goes, women know, men suppose.
I think you have to, and that's like one of the hardest things is to know when to listen and when not. And that I tell that to my students, I tell them like I'll give them a lot of criticism, and I'm kind of a tough teacher actually. And I'll be like, try it. And but I tell them this is like, even when you're grown up, you have to listen to what other people say, because you can be blind to your own work. You're too close to it. Yeah. I need somebody who's not.
What's the most significant difference between men and women, physical aside?
That's an interesting question. I do think women, other than some cases, there's no one size fits all, because I do think women often do compromise more.
Yeah.
We're kind of brought up that way. No, there's always exceptions.
Yeah, no, that's it. And it's funny because for 2 years, because the Me Too movement, people would go, I'm not going there. And I was like, oh, okay. So now I'm bringing it back in and it's fine. But I wanted to bring up just briefly that the female gaze thing, because, John Berger brought up male gaze in 72. Then Laura Mulvey, talked about the female gaze in 75. And then Nina Menkins just made a documentary called Brainwash. It's all about the female gaze and the male gaze in Hollywood. So, you probably know a little about it at least, but it goes back to Alice Guy Blanchet, who it's just a general question, is if she helped invent narrative cinema, like it's documented now, she got blackballed out of the history. She's there with Méliès inventing. Did she have a male gaze because she grew up looking at paintings and photographs that were mainly from males? Or is there a female gaze that she had and she saw things differently? So, I mean, I don't want to divide us. I know there's the human gaze, and my friend said we invented the human gaze. We invented eye contact when we look into our mother's eyes and she feeds us. So, did we invent the human gaze? Did we invent eye contact? Just your thoughts on that. Is there a female gaze and a male gaze, sort of?
I think that's kind of gross biology, actually.
Gross? What do you mean?
Biological, like I don't believe in these kind of biological distinctions.
Biological determinism, yeah.
Exactly. I mean, I love Laura Mulvey. I'm actually a good friend of Laura Mulvey's, a very good friend of Laura Mulvey's. And, she wrote that essay in the 70s as a polemical piece. She kind of threw it out there. And it's now become canonical. Every student reads it. And she doesn't think like that,
Wow.
And she's written, critiques of her own writing. She never meant it to be some kind of be all and end all canonical piece.
Wow. You taught me something important. Have you or her seen Brainwashed by Nina Menkins? Do you know?
No, I don't know. I haven't seen it.
I think she's in it too. So I'm anxious to see it, because
I think she was a little taken aback by how, as I say, it became kind of etched in stone.
Yeah.
Whereas it was something to start the discussion, not end it.
Yeah.
I think that would be the way I would phrase it.
That is beautiful.
There's one thing when you're talking about certain kinds of specifically kind of Hitchcockian voyeuristic films.
Yeah.
On the other hand, I'm extremely voyeuristic. I love to look at things. I like to look at all kinds of things. I like to look at sexual images of
Yeah.
men, of women, whatever.
Yeah.
I love to look. So to say that women are not voyeuristic is just, from my own experience, plain wrong.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it became this Laura Mulvey thing, very kind of puritanical, like,
Yeah.
and then like Yvonne Rainer took it up, and like we must have no women being looked at, and oh God, in the 80s it was terrible, and that's not like Laura Mulvey is not like that at all. She's kind of like, she loves old Hollywood films. She's happy to look at female nudity. You know, she's a fun loving woman.
Beautiful. Thanks for teaching me that. That's great, Zoe. So you've in your accomplishments, rate these three elements: luck, skill, and ambition. What played the biggest role, second and third?
I'd say luck and skill and white privilege.
Luck and skill and white privilege. Wow, that's good. Luck, skill, and white privilege. Now, do you think ambition is based more on fear or joy?
Aggression.
Wow. Anger can be a productive emotion when fill in the blank.
When it drives you to do something.
Yeah.
As opposed to sitting and stewing.
Well, it goes to, this is the Bertolt Brecht question I want to. Bertolt Brecht said, I don't want art that puts me in a trance. I want art that activates me. Mm-hmm. Now, I since you know Brecht better than me, you can be put into a trance through art, and it might lead to activation. So how do you navigate that? You know,
I'm trying to think of kind of how that could be.
Well, you could have an epiphany. You know, if you're a Deadhead and you go to a Grateful Dead concert and you dance for 3 hours.
But I don't think that would make you think maybe I need to change the world. Maybe it just make you feel good. I don't think that's what
it could increase your need to do what you've started off with, to be loved. You know, the first hippie ever was Eden Abez. He was the proto hippie. He wrote a song called Nature Boy. And he says the greatest lesson that can be learned is to be loved and to love and be loved in return. So you need to, you know, you said to be loved, but you also probably implied you want to love also. So I'm just saying this, it's sort of like, let's then skip the Brecht so much as, does satire news more activate or more pacify people? So, you know, in my opinion, kids watch Colbert. We grew up watching the Saturday Night Live, or That Was the Week That Was, or Mad Magazine. Did it more activate us or pacify us? Our parents watched Johnny Carson, and then we go, ha, 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 and then we wouldn't do anything. So, you know, in the midst of satire news, it may activate us. I don't think it does, but who knows? So, you know, you worked with this was specifically with Occupy. You know, when you did the Occupy Bertolt Brecht, you know, what is it? Is it activating or pacifying? See, kids might watch a Occupy documentary and go, oh, I'm for that. And then they don't do anything. So
sometimes these things are hard to qualify.
Yeah.
I think, I'm not sure, like, whether, like, as a, like, political tool, my doing the Days of the Commune was super useful. I think we all the people who took part, we all learned something.
Yeah.
as a group, and we learn to be a group, and we learn to be a commune, and and just for a moment to kind of imagine things differently, which is sometimes a start.
Yeah.
I mean, I think if you really want to change the world, you should probably run for office, you know. But I think artists can give one a perspective on things. I think that's what Brecht tried to do.
That's beautiful because, Godard told Michael Moore when he premiered Fahrenheit 9/11 at Cannes, he says, this film's going to help Bush get elected. Now, it didn't help Bush get elected per se, but it galvanized pro-Bushers. So it is interesting. Just, I guess I'm sorry to ramble on and on, but I thought the best statement I've ever heard on this is two people talking is the revolution. Just to start the dialogue going can help move the project forward, because it seems as though you have political concerns.
Yeah, I do have, I mean, because I live in the world, and I feel like because I live in the world, and the world, like I said, is a dark place right now, I can't pretend, go away into my ivory tower and pretend it ain't happening.
Yeah.
The 90s, I was much less concerned with these things, but it was a calmer time, I think. I could delve into the past and meteor archaeology and all that kind of stuff, but like, we are living brutal times right now. It's a different world than 20 years ago.
Well, tell me one major element for the years you've been making art, films, one major element that stayed the same and one major element that's changed.
That's a really interesting question. Because I struggled really a lot. I mean, I'm not one of these people, like, there are certain artists that start out when they're young, kind of fully formed. They like, their first work is like amazing. It's like Jasper Johns painted his flags when he was 22. The first film that Jack Smith ever made was fabulous.
Yeah.
I'm not like that. I like grew slowly through missteps, and stumbling, because there wasn't an easy roadmap for me. I think there wasn't a thing, that a group, a thing, a guidepost. But interestingly, you should mention Godard, because when I was in art school, I read about Godard, but his films were never shown. It wasn't like you could go stream it or something. Nobody would show his films. They were like, so I hijacked the money from the sketch club and used it to, because nobody was sketching, and rented a couple of Godard films and showed them at my school to me and my friends. And I was kind of blown away. And I think, even though I don't make films exactly like that, but I was really blown away for some reasons that I think have still stayed with me, because they're films about ideas, yet formally they're super interesting. To me, they were like a call to low budget. They weren't like Hollywood films. You could imagine making, Vive sa vie or something.
Yeah.
You could imagine doing that yourself. It didn't seem impossible.
Yeah.
And when he used color, it was like painting. And so those kind of ideas, but yet a real engagement with form, I think is something that I've kind of goes through my work, and has stayed with me.
That's good. And you said that well, misstep and stumbling. It's like, I love how Buster Keaton could turn a stumble into a dance.
Yeah.
So that goes with this question perfectly. Moshe Feldenkrais works with healing and movement. He says it's literally possible to identify a weakness and incorporate it to become a strength rather than we're normally taught to overcome a weakness.
Mhm.
Tell me a weakness you turned into a strength.
That's a really interesting question. Um, I'm not like a novelist. I'm not somebody who comes up with stories like from my head. So I become, but I love stories, and so I call myself like a story scavenger.
Oh, that is cool. I'm going to use that. I like that. A story scavenger. That is great. So you mean, but what's the weakness? Oh, you can't come up with a
Right.
story
Yes.
on your own. So the strength is that you sort of know how to pull out of, yeah,
Out of something, whether it's old home movies or
yeah.
some notes for a film that was never made or something.
What's the ultimate art form, I think, is collage art, and it's Duchamp. He said the artists of the future will only have to point. So all we do is, like, I'm a scavenger artist too. I just point at this, this, and this, and put them together and go, okay, that's my art. And they're like, what? No, that was well done. So T.S. Eliot said poetry is outing your inner dialogue. What language is your inner dialogue in?
Unfortunately, it's in English
What
because
form is your inner consciousness in?
uh, I don't know. I dream in color. Um,
That's good. Do you know Abigail Child?
yeah.
I said, "What form is your inner consciousness in?" She goes, "I wish I knew." Okay, is perception reality?
Um, it's the only one we have access to.
Oh, that is beautiful. Lewis Carroll says, I believe as many as 6 impossible things before breakfast. Have you believed in any impossible things lately?
I wish. I don't think so. I think there's difference between fantasizing. I can tell the difference between fantasizing things but I don't believe them.
Yeah. We got about 10 more minutes, Zoe. This has really been fun. A few more questions. We're out of here. I really appreciate your time. There's a line that goes, you create what you resist. Bob Goldthwait, the comedian, morphed it into, you are what you hate. James Joyce said, it's a curious thing how your mind is super saturated with the religion in which you say you disbelieve. And Louis Buñuel said, thank God I'm an atheist. So any comment on this thought, you create what you resist? I'm not saying you, Zoe, but one creates what one resists. Any thoughts on that idea?
No, I'm kind of lost.
These are 5 quick Alan Watts questions, just off the top of your head. No worries. In a few words, who started it all?
Those cave painters.
Are we going to make it? Good. You don't need words. That's it. Gesture. We're on live TV. That's
Yeah.
great. Like that. I love that. Where do we put it?
I think I'd like to put it in an archive. I've been
Nice.
thinking about that quite seriously with some of the work I've been doing. Not It doesn't necessarily belong like in a museum, but it's a record of a time.
I love it. I'm an archivist my whole life. I got lucky. I got to store some of my archives in a cool archive, but it's a hard world. Okay, 2 more Alan Watts questions. Who's cleaning it up?
Well, we all need to get to work. All of us need to get to work.
Beautiful. Is it serious?
Yeah.
Super cool. We're almost out of here. How do you find peace of mind?
Sometimes in many different ways. Sometimes I'm just lost in these worlds that I create, and I really kind of just immersed in that. I sometimes I'm just during COVID, I would take walks with my partner, and we would walk along the river and watch the light, and it was kind of an incredible time. I mean, it was a dark time, but we would do this every day. We would walk by the river and watch the boats and the light and the changing light, and it was always enough, and it was always interesting. And we get so rushed around and we're so busy. It was actually kind of amazing for the better part of a year, just to, maybe longer. I can't remember. I would say we're in our gilded cage, and then we'd have to ride our bikes across a bridge. But there was something very beautiful about that, and that was a very peaceful time.
I like that. But I'm a bike rider 3 times a day, and it's a ritual, and it's like the circle of the wheel turning has something to do with allowing my brain to just find a sort of yogic peace of mind. If you were walking down the street today and you met yourself as a 12-year-old, what would you say to your 12-year-old self?
It'll get better. Very important. I was not a happy 12-year-old.
Which way should toilet paper come off the roll? Over or under? God,
I can't remember which. I know I do it the other way to my partner. So I can't remember which way, but it's always the other way.
That is the most unique answer I've ever gotten. If a publisher was to release your autobiography off the top of your head, what would the title be?
I never want to write my autobiography. I don't want it to be about me.
Okay, but if it was released, they want to scent the glue in the binding. What smell would
Um, uh, otherwise.
Otherwise, that's an amazing. You mean no particular smell?
Just call it otherwise.
Otherwise is the best title for a smell ever. They want to have the ink on some of the pages other than black. What color?
Red. I love red. My favorite color.
If a statue was built in your honor, where would you want it displayed and what would it be made of?
That's very sweet. Well, as you might know, I'm totally against pedestals, so it will definitely be at eye level. And I don't know, maybe it should be made of something. It's very simple. Maybe just, I think wood would be nice.
Wood is great. Tell me something good you never had and you never want.
Children.
That is the answer. You know who gave me that answer? Mike Kelly.
Really?
You know that artist?
Yes. I mean, not I didn't know him personally, but
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sad I don't have children.
But it is an amazing answer. It's good. You never had it and you never want it. People get perplexed by the question, but that was a very legitimate answer. If you were in a vat of vomit up to your neck and someone threw a bag of shit at your face, what would you do?
I'd hope to die.
What does hope to die mean? I've heard that.
I just would like to my life to end.
Right then. Wow. Do you believe in life after death?
I don't think so. No.
But there was one word, paranormal, in one of your blurbs. What does that mean to you? What's paranormal?
Paranormal is the ability to perceive things not through our normal channels of sense.
Wow. You mean it's not, is it like ghost?
It might be. It can be any kind of perception that doesn't we cannot explain through whatever.
Through like biology. So like,
Yeah.
is that ESP?
Yeah.
Yeah. Because have you ever studied or read Finnegan's Wake out loud with a group of people? The book by
No, I
Jim.
never have.
Take one page and read it with your friends out loud, and don't try to figure out what it is, but it is the most amazing thing is Joyce invented whatever's going to be after the internet. He invented the internet and whatever's after the internet and disguised it as a book. So you think you're reading a book, but really it's very much like ESP. You can find your life in this book because it's just 628 pages of gibberish, but it's pretty amazing. It's deeper than that.
You know, it just made me think about how at a certain point in one of my classes, I talked to my students about the concept of the unconscious,
Yeah.
and they've never heard of it.
Yeah.
And I mean, they've certainly never heard of psychoanalysis. And to them, being unconscious means you drink too much and you fall over unconscious. And the idea that you're not in control of yourself and at all times and understand everything about you, they just think it's ridiculous.
It's ridiculous. That's sad they don't, because some kids do. I work with younger people too, and some of them do get that. But it's like George Lakoff, the linguist, and neuroscientists say, hey, we're only 20% doing what we're like. How much percent are you conscious of making your art? Like they say that you're like 80% of your art is made from your unconscious, but you would probably want to say, no, I'm conscious of what I'm doing. What, just a guess percentage, how much are you consciously making your art, and how much is your unconscious making your art?
It's a hard question. I'm not like one of these people that just throw myself at the canvas and see what happens. Like, but where do your ideas come from when you're like, why do you know that color
Yeah.
is right? There's a million things that like you just know or
It's
come to you or I don't know.
it's gut. The question I left, can we go a couple minutes over, or you got to
Just
run?
a couple minutes, yeah.
Okay. The one quickie was we don't even have to answer it, is where do we get technique, theory, and taste? So you know how to paint, you know how to combine colors, then how do you get taste? And it's funny because it's a gut thing. Is it a muse or a gut or a conscious? Anyways, that's just to contemplate for
It's like
next one.
having a musical ear,
A musical ear. That's it. Okay. What's the cultural shift you see developing today that inspires you?
That's a really interesting question. Um, there's like um, there's a lot more attention paid to really interesting Black artists whose work I've been discovering and have been really important to me in the last few years.
Good. You have an in with Kara Walker? Because I really want to interview her. Do you know her?
I wish I've never met her. No, I mean, I love her work and have
Her
for
work is
decades,
amazing.
but no.
Yeah. So Thornton Wilder said in 1928, art is confession, art is the secret told. But art is not only the desire to tell one's secret, it's the desire to tell it and hide it at the same time. Zoe, you laid your cards on the table for over 90 minutes. I'm not insinuating you haven't already answered this, but what's it really all about for you?
I think for me, my art is to a way to be in the world and to understand it and to give voice to things that I think should be voiced.
Yeah.
And that's where my cast of characters come in.
Yeah. You are really articulate. I appreciate it. The last question is, what gives you the most optimism?
Oh. What gives me? I'm not alone.
Nice. The first question is from someone who studied Wilhelm Reich. What's the best thing for a human being? And he says, another human being. The last question is what they asked Groucho Marx at the end of his life. What gives you the most optimism? He said, other people. Sure been fun having this time shared with you, Zoe. One little quickie. Who introduced us? Was it Flash or someone? Do you know? Did I find you, or do you know
You
who
emailed me. I have no idea how you found me.
I don't know, but I sure am grateful for your time. And I hope we can continue the discussion forever and ever, even though I'm going to hit the end broadcast button now.
Okay. Well, it was great to meet you too. And this was really, really interesting. Thank you for your amazing questions.
Thank you, Zoe.
Thanks.